This is the AI Brief, brought to you by the YPO Technology Network, and I'm Stephen Forte, the Full Circle. Today, we'll talk about why the smartest AI strategy might be pulling some of your intelligence out of the cloud, and what that means for your budget, your data, and your competitive edge. Let's start with something that would have been unthinkable 18 months ago. Open source AI models, the ones anyone can download and run, are now matching or beating the proprietary systems that companies pay millions to access. This is not a niche development. This is a structural shift in the economics of artificial intelligence. Kimi K2.5, an open source model from Moonshot AI, just scored 99 out of 100 on Human Evol. The standard coding benchmark, that is the highest score ever recorded by any model, open or closed. Alibaba's Qwen 3.5 hit 88.4% on the GPQA Diamond Science benchmark, beating every closed model, including Claude Opus. And this is not one outlier. 5 independent model families are now at frontier class capability simultaneously. DeepSeek, Qwen, Kimi, GLM, and Mistral. All open, all competitive, all available to run on your own hardware. Now, here is the fence. This does not mean you should cancel your OpenAI contract tomorrow. Closed models, GPT 5.4, Claude Opus, Gemini, still hold a real lead on the hardest reasoning tasks, complex multi-step agentic workflows, and the kind of nuanced judgment calls that matter in high-stakes enterprise decisions. That gap is real. But it is narrowing, and more importantly, it does not apply to most of the work enterprises actually use AI for. The question your CTO should be asking is not which model is best. It is which tasks actually need a frontier model and which ones do not. Classification, extraction, summarization, document routing, form processing, basic code review, internal search, a well-configured 7 to 70 billion parameter open source model handles these at 95% or better of frontier quality. And here is the number that matters. A fine-tuned 3.8 billion parameter model, tiny by today's standards, outperformed GPT-4o on 6 out of 7 financial NLP benchmarks at 28 times lower cost per token, not 28% lower, 28 times. Think about what that means in practice. A $40 million regional bank running AI-assisted loan document review. Today, every document hits a cloud API at $2 to $5 per million tokens. The compliance team processes maybe 500 million tokens a month. That is $1 million annual line item, growing as adoption scales. Now picture a Llama 4 Maverick or Mistral Large 3 running on-premise, handling 90% of that document flow in the straightforward extraction and classification, while only the genuinely complex cases route up to a frontier model in the cloud. That intelligent routing pattern cuts costs 30 to 85%, depending on the workload mix. Not theoretical. Companies are doing this now, which brings us to the second piece of this puzzle. The hardware to run these models locally now exists at every price point, and the economics have flipped faster than most people realize. This is not about buying a data center. This is not about 2018 era on-premise versus cloud debates. The new hardware is fundamentally different. An Apple Mac Studio with the M3 Ultra chip, $14,000, can run DeepSeek R1, a 671 billion parameter model natively, under 200 watts of power. That is a machine that sits on a desk, plugs into a standard outlet, and runs one of the most capable open source models in existence. Independent benchmarks show it delivers the most tokens per joule of energy of any system tested, better than NVIDIA's $30,000 data center GPUs on an efficiency basis. NVIDIA's Project DIGITS, at just $3,000, handles models up to 200 billion parameters. And Dell, which we talked about yesterday, just shipped the first desktop with NVIDIA's GB300 chip, 748 gigabytes of memory, 20 petaflops of AI compute, trillion parameter capability at a workstation. Dell's AI business went from 0 to $25 billion in 2 years because enterprises are buying this hardware. But here is where the economics get really interesting. And this is the number I want you to remember. Lenovo's 2026 total cost of ownership study found that on-premise inference costs 11 cents per million tokens. The equivalent cloud API call for a GPT-5 Mini, $2. That is an 18 times cost gap. At high utilization, the on-premise hardware pays for itself in under 4 months. I've been sitting with these numbers, and here is where I land. The break-even signal for most companies is when your monthly cloud AI spend reaches about 60 to 70% of what the equivalent on-premise setup would cost. Once you cross that line, every additional month of API spend is money you are giving away. For a mid-market company running 1 billion tokens a month, which is not unusual if you have deployed AI across customer service, document processing, and internal workflows, the 3-year savings is nearly $2 million. Now, this is not just about cost. The second driver is confidentiality. Every query you send to a cloud API transits someone else's infrastructure. For most business tasks, that is fine. But for proprietary R&D data, legal documents, M&A analysis, customer health records, or classified government work, the risk calculus is different. Running inference locally means your data never leaves your building. No cross-border transfer obligations under GDPR. No third-party business associate agreements under HIPAA. No Cloud Act exposure. And with the EU AI Act's high-risk deadlines hitting in August 2026, the compliance argument for local AI is only getting stronger. And this is where the story comes full circle. If open source models are good enough for most enterprise tasks, and the hardware to run them locally is affordable and powerful, the natural next question is, what happens when you train a model on your own data? That is exactly what Mistral is betting on with Forge. We covered Forge a few episodes back, but since then, Mistral has accelerated. On March 30th, just 3 days ago, they closed $830 million in debt financing to build a 44-megawatt data center near Paris with 1,800 of NVIDIA's latest GB300 GPUs. They signed Accenture as a strategic partner, 700,000 employees now using Mistral internally. And CEO Arthur Mensch confirmed the company is on track to pass $1 billion in annual recurring revenue this year. Forge's thesis is that a model trained from scratch on your proprietary data, not fine-tuned, not ragged, but genuinely trained on your institutional knowledge and becomes a compounding competitive asset. Year 1, it knows your domain. Year 2, it has internalized a year of new decisions and operational patterns. Year 3, it carries institutional knowledge that took decades to accumulate. A competitor using a generic API cannot replicate that because they do not have your data. Here is the honest assessment. Forge-style pre-training and at $500,000 or more for a custom model is not for most companies today. It requires large structured data sets, regulatory constraints that make cloud dependency unacceptable, and the organizational maturity to treat AI as infrastructure. The early adopters are ASML, the European Space Agency, Ericsson, Singapore's Defense Labs. These are not typical mid-market firms, but the strategic question Forge raises matters for every CEO in this audience. Are you treating your company's proprietary data as a future training asset? Because the cost of custom model training will follow the same curve as everything else in AI. What cost $500,000 today will cost $50,000 in 3 years. The companies that win that era are the ones structuring, labeling, and governing their data now. So today, open source models closing the gap with frontier, hardware making local inference practical and cheap, and custom training turning proprietary data into competitive moats. The thread through all of it is this. The cloud was the starting line for enterprise AI, not the finish line. The companies that figure out what to keep in the cloud and what to bring home will spend dramatically less and own dramatically more. That is the YPO Tech Network AI Brief for Friday, April 3rd. I am Stephen Forte. If this was useful, send it to a fellow member. I will be back Monday with more. Until then, stay sharp.